actually, Jeff has had a role in every single film I've made except for one. That movie would be Hillside Cannibals. Jeff didn't want to run around the desert and eat fake body parts. Picky, Jeff Denton. Picky.
It's ironic that I said in my When a Killer Calls review that I'm surprised there aren't more movies based on urban legends, because, released within a year of each other, we did get at least 2 movies based on popular urban legends. When a Stranger Calls and The Hitcher. Coincidentally, both also remakes of 80s horror movies. The original The Hitcher is one of those cult movies where... I don't know why it's a cult movie. Released in 1986, the movie is a road thriller detailing the efforts of a young man fleeing a crazed hitchhiker slasher killer, who always seems to know where he's going and always has a nasty surprise waiting for him. And since he can't prove that there's some crazy old guy doing all this, even the law goes after him, the squadron's getting larger and more bloodthirsty for every pursuit. Sort of like Thelma and Louise meets The Terminator. This is a movie I've heard a lot about in passing, with a lot of movie buffs mentioning it here and there, but that's about all I knew about it for the longest time. But in preparation for this review, I did sit down and watch it, and it's fun. Not good, but a lot of fun. It's definitely a thriller, most scenes keeping you on the edge of your seat if our hero Jim will make it out alive. And because the killer is set up to appear anywhere at any time, there's an air of tension all throughout that Jim will never be safe, never find sanctuary, especially when every cop in the county is also chasing him. But the hitchhiker always remains the main threat, with seemingly superhuman abilities that include, but aren't limited to, taking down whole forces of armed cops and even blowing a helicopter out of the air with a handgun. This is the insane, over-the-top, all-stops-pulled action that I crave from 80s action movies. Helped immensely by the main leads played by C. Thomas Howell and Rutger Hauer, 2 of my absolute favorite actors. But I'll admit, the movie does drag at times, with a lot of plot holes and pure coincidences that do start to add up. And the third act is where it really starts to get boring, with things wrapped up too neatly given everything that happened in the first hour. In fact, with its many contrivances, and the subtle clues the movie seems to be giving us, I was really hoping it would end like that one Twilight Zone episode, which would have explained a lot. But it doesn't. It just ends. And it's that disappointment that probably led to an underperforming box office and scathing reviews from critics, with Siskel and Ebert awarding the movie a rare 0-star rating. Personally, I don't think it's that bad, and it has gotten a bit of reappraisal in recent years, with the lead's performances in particular receiving massive praise. Nowadays, it feels like one of those movies that's kinda stuck in neutral, with a lot of people saying it's a fun viewing experience, but not having much else to say about it. And yeah, I'm pretty much in that group. It's worth at least one watch for its unrepentant levels of 80s cheese and over-the-top practical effects and explosions. But if you ask me what makes it so memorable, I'm gonna forget the question immediately. Still, despite its critical and commercial failure, it was popular enough for a direct-to-DVD sequel 17 years later, also starring C. Thomas Howell, and the aforementioned remake 4 years after that, with Sean Bean starring as the psychopathic hitchhiker. I haven't seen that one, but from what I've read, it's basically the first movie again. Just with more blood and gore and ickiness, and a gender swap for our innocent leads. And it was produced by Michael Bay, which actually makes perfect sense for him to want to do his own version of an explosion-heavy, slightly exploitative 80s cheese fest. A lot more sense than his take on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, anyway. And not wanting to be left in the dust, the Asylum produced their own take on the story, simply called The Hitchhiker. Which is honestly a better title than the real thing. I hear Hitcher, and I either think it's a story about a possessed U-Haul trailer, or a sequel to that Will Smith rom-com. Both of which I wouldn't mind seeing. And writer-director of this knockoff of a movie, known for its high-octane thrills, is Lee Scott, who by this point has mostly done slow-paced horror and adventure movies. Hey, good chance to expand his experience. Let's hitch a ride and see if we have a 5-star Uber experience, or if we wish we were riding with large Marge instead. On their way to Vegas, 4 young women decide to give a ride to a handsome hitchhiker going their way. A short while later, their car mysteriously breaks down, forcing them to spend a few days in a motel in the middle of Utah. While they're bummed about missing their party weekend, they try to make the most of it, with Jack the Hitchhiker seeming to be quite the party animal. However, as they soon learn, Jack has plans for all of them, and they may never see Vegas or anywhere else ever again. Will these women escape the misogynistic clutches of Jack the Charming? Does this movie keep saying Beaver, Utah like it's the funniest joke in the universe? Surprisingly for an Asylum mockbuster cashing in on a remake of a movie, this film doesn't take any beats from the movie being remade. Most of the movies we've looked at made to capitalize on a horror remake, you can tell they drew inspiration from the original film, to the point that they themselves could be considered remakes. Winter Killer Calls has a creep who's calling from inside the house, Halloween Night has someone who is horribly scarred as a child, returning to his childhood home as an adult to violently evict everyone there. Exorcism and 666 have more references to The Exorcist and The Omen than I can count, you get the idea. What happens in The Hitchhiker? Some people pick up a hitchhiker. That's it. He doesn't chase them all over the country, he doesn't have unexplained teleportation powers, the police don't have a misunderstanding and chase after our leads instead. Even the iconic scene where someone is ripped in half by a big rig isn't even alluded to. It's just that our heroes pick up a hitchhiker who later turns out to be dangerous. Okay, in the opening scene, Jack and a hitchhiker have a conversation that's clearly influenced by dialogue from the original movie, but its relevance is superfluous at best, like the very brief appearance of Bobo the Owl in the Clash of the Titans remake. On the one hand, this means there's a chance for a more original creative story. On the other hand, it means the Asylum has to be original and creative. And we've seen how well they've handled that in the past. By this point, I think they've proven that their best ideas came from someone else. Okay, now that we've established what this movie isn't, what is this movie? That's both really easy to sum up, and yet very hard. At its core, the movie is a rape revenge story. A group of women are drugged and kidnapped by a misogynist, who then proceeds to rape and or kill the group. It's about as basic and messed up as I just made it sound, and just as boring as these movies usually start out as. Before we get to the part we love to hate, we first have to sit through 20-30 minutes of tedious, drawn-out scenes the movie considers setup, while introducing its hastily cut-out paper dolls that masquerade as its main leads. And who are our leads? 4 women named Denise, Patty, Krista, and Melinda. I only know their names because the movie was courteous enough to include a scene introducing them. Because otherwise, I just call them the dumb blonde one, the dumb blonde one, the dumb blonde one, and the auburn-haired mother figure, who's also dumb. And I probably still will. There is practically no difference between any of these plasticine mannequins posing as people. They're all the same whiny, airheaded, instantly drunk party girls that serve as the meat train for 90% of all slasher and torture movies. We're just missing the eternally horny muscle man, the pothead, and the nice but boringly bland boyfriend who actually wants to commit to a relationship. Sometimes the movie tries to give them standout attributes, like one's a little more passive-aggressive than the others because she's on boyfriend rebound, and the mother figure is a little less horny because she's a married woman. But otherwise, everything they say or do could have been said or done by any of them. If you're like me, you're gonna forget which traits belong to whom, and you'll find yourself rewinding back to the scene where they introduce themselves every 5 minutes to remind yourself who's who. If you even care enough by the halfway mark. Oh, and later a dark-haired woman joins the group. For reasons unknown, because all she does is serve as a deus ex machina at one point, and her entire performance could have been given to one of the other women without having to rewrite a thing. Yet, somehow, even one of these characters still has more personality than the entirety of The Legend of Bloody Jack. And as usual, the writing doesn't make sitting through this any smoother a ride. It's another Lee Scott Penn script, and to his credit, it does contain the most realistic dialogue I've ever heard from a Lee Scott movie. By which I mean he takes a break from the Bibles of world building and theses on humanity's shortcomings he usually likes to include, and instead writes what a middle-aged man thinks 30-year-old women talk about. So, instead of the burst dams of lore and backstory they usually spout from his characters, we get to hear this.
Just play the iPod. Because she only has 20 songs on it. It's my party mix. And we're gonna party.
Oh my god, you're so crazy.
Girl, this pool is disgusting and it's like 12 degrees.
Sokka, do you have to smoke?
I smoke 2 packs a day. I can't sit in the car for 5 more hours and not smoke.
Look at that body. You two gonna rock, paper, scissors to see who gets to bone him? Oh my god, Krista.
Is that a dude walking on the side of the road?
It is. What the hell is he doing out here?
Wimp and wimp. That's what you are. Hey, where's my drink?
Then why buy an iPod if you're only gonna put 20, songs on it? Kind of defeats the purpose. iPod it is.
Alright, I need a beer.
Oh, well, right here, Missy.
Because you know what they say. What happens in Beaver, Utah stays in Beaver, Utah.
Yeah, suddenly a 24-hour loop of Dracula's curse doesn't seem so bad. But for the first third of the movie, that's what we get. A group of women get drunk and party while giddily squealing about how they'll get drunk and party, and how much they want to do the handsome hitchhiker they picked up right before their car broke down. But it's when one of the women actually does him that things get ugly. And not in the way you think. Okay, yes, in that way, but a more prominent story-driven way as well. And most of it centers around Jack the Hitchhiker, played by Jeff Denton. Long before I saw this movie, heck, starting in the early days of this retrospective, I noticed that whenever someone mentioned Jeff Denton, it was usually followed up with his performance in this movie. Oh, Jeff Denton's terrible here, but at least he was good in Hitchhiker. I only know this actor for Hitchhiker. The incomparable Jeff Denton, whom you may know from Hitchhiker, it gave me chills like Jeff Denton's performance in Hitchhiker, and so on. So, with how everyone seems to associate Jeff Denton with this one movie, this must be the standout performance of his career. This movie is to him what Killers was to Scott Carson, or Exorcism was to Thomas Downey, or Jane White was to Kim Little. The role of a lifetime that shows what he's like at 110% and perfectly showcases the life this actor can bring to a character. And I'm happy to say that is exactly what Jeff Denton brings to the screen. If his goal was to play one of the most inconsistent characters I've ever seen, okay, I can't entirely blame Jeff for this script-related problem. As I said, he brings an immense amount of energy to just another throwaway role, with his overacting greatly standing out against the rest of the cast's underacting. But I have no idea what he's trying to play. From what I can interpret, the story behind Jack is that his significant other cheated on him, so he killed her. And now, whenever he's with another woman whom he deems unfaithful, he has to kill her too. And everyone around her, no matter what their relation is. Okay, you know what? That's a character. A perfectly serviceable villain that Jeff Denton could easily pull off and even add a bit of a creep factor to. Except I don't think that's the direction he was given. If he was given any direction, because his performance and personality is all over the map. Most of the people he kills, he does with a stone face. But then he'll suddenly get angry that he has to kill people. Like he doesn't want to, but he has to. Like he's suddenly Anton from No Country for Old Men. But then he'll smile and say he's a seasoned serial killer who has no problem killing people. But then he'll just let anyone who talks back to him live, even though he says that he can't let them live because they'll out him. Throughout the movie, he seems fixated on Sarah Leaving's character, because she hesitated to kill him at one point, so he interprets that as trust. Despite how multiple times before and after, she lies to his face and or tries to trick him. And he's randomly in love with this other woman for maybe a minute. Which, if he's already made his decision, then why let anyone else live? And while it sounds like I'm describing a complex psychopathic killer who toys with his victims, continually keeping them guessing before he kills them, that's not the impression the movie gives. For most of the runtime, Jack just comes across as a stereotypical country hick, who's handsome and charming, but doesn't have much going on upstairs. He drinks, he beats women, he's clearly emotionally underdeveloped, and he solves his problems through violence, not always having the foresight to realize where his actions are leading him. He's a stupid, horny man-child, until the script decrees he has to do or say something smart, which is then immediately followed by him doing something stupid, because, hey, our leads need to escape for a minute. It's like if in Batman, if Killer Croc suddenly, in the middle of a fight, ran off to build a deadly chemical bomb, then gave a big, out-of-character villain speech about how he'll detonate it in the middle of Gotham, but then forgot to put any chemicals inside. That's how sudden, yet still stupid, Jack's bursts of smartness seem. These moments don't just ruin the character, they ruin the movie's tone. We'll get long sequences of him beating and raping the women, and I'm just sitting here racking my brain and going, what is he trying to accomplish? What does he hope to get out of this? Does he have a big picture in his head, or is this just a knee-jerk reaction to his PTSD? The movie wants to make him look smart and that there's a method to his madness, but he just comes across like Homer Simpson dancing around singing, I am the smart S-M-R-T. S-M-A-R-T. Honestly, it just feels like an attempt to overcomplicate what should be a simple story. What do you need for a rape revenge movie? Well, you need a strong, usually female lead who gets tortured and nearly killed by a bigoted, usually male sadist, who then turns the tables and kills, or at least brings to justice, their attacker. That's pretty much all you need for a good movie of this genre. Like a slasher movie, the fun comes from how the revenge is handled, and how much dedication the actors give to their roles. How I see it, Jack would have been better if they didn't give him any background. If they didn't try to give him any humanity or justify his hatred of women. Just have him be a flat misogynistic creep who wants to beat, rape, and murder women because he wants to. He just has a compulsion to do wrong, and causing pain makes him happy, like Kurt Russell from Death Proof. If Jeff Dane gave the same level of energy and passion to that performance, he would still come across as a creepy yet somewhat intriguing villain. Because sometimes, that's all a villain needs. Jack Ryder from the original Hitcher was given next to no character, but he didn't need any. All he needed to be was the embodiment of fear and chaos, a seemingly indestructible, omnipotent force that could follow anyone anywhere, smiling as he made Jim's life a living hell. And Rutger Hauer played him so chillingly well, he's more memorable than some villains I could think of with a fleshed out backstory. Same with Grigori from Stranger Things, or, as I like to call him, Terminator. Even When a Killer Calls got this right, with a skin-crawlingly skeevy performance from Mark Irvingson. When you're trying to depict true evil, sometimes less is more. Jack in this movie is given too much, like they wanted to write a misogynistic asshole, but they couldn't decide what kind of misogynistic asshole. So they wrote him as all of them. And he just comes across as an unstable blend of conflicting traits, too complex to be the simple villain the movie needs, yet not structured or fleshed out enough to be his own character. At best, he's the male version of what people thought, and still might think, a feminist is. A never-happy, short-tempered woman who storms around screaming to everyone in the street about how she hates men, who just needs a strong, confident man to shout back at her and put her in her place. The perfect relationship! You know, in the eyes of an incel, whose only experience with women is from trying to hit on the cashiers at Target. But if they had to give Jack a character, there's an easy fix there too. At the beginning, we're treated to a scene where he's driving down a long highway, before driving into the woods, where he proceeds to bury a young woman alive. Have this be his first kill. Establish, or at least strongly hint, that this is the girlfriend or wife suggested was cheating on him. And he doesn't want to kill her, but he's too angry and betrayed and feels like he has a compulsion to do it. Make him nervous, scared, clearly unstable all throughout his drive and eventual murder. Especially when he briefly picks up a hitchhiker, who he then kicks out because he dared to challenge his masculinity. And then, on the way out, his car breaks down, and that's where our leads pick him up. He's still shaken, but he tries to hide it and enjoy his time with the group. Then their car breaks down, they're forced to stay at a motel, and they continue to enjoy themselves, with Jack even feeling like he can start a new relationship with one of them. But then the woman who said she had a boyfriend hits on him, and that triggers him. Sends him back to that dark place that made him kill. He comes to the conclusion that women can't be trusted, and he has to kill them all before they can betray anyone else, while also killing anyone who might get in his way. He drugs, then binds the group and shoves them in a room, where he again acts nervous, but angrily screams that they forced him to do this, and he keeps them tied up and alive while he figures out how to kill them while hiding the evidence. Just like in the movie, he rapes and beats them, but it's the product of a scarred mind becoming more and more unraveled as he tries to justify his actions and enforce his masculinity. And he does kill at least one of them, but it's a knee-jerk reaction, and he's angry about it as well, since he has no idea how to clean up the mess. But as the movie continues, his nervousness gives way to contentment and satisfaction, and he becomes more comfortable with murdering women, finally deciding that this is his calling. To punish any woman that doesn't meet his standards, especially those that would gladly cheat on their partner. And that's who the surviving women must escape before he tires of playing with them and kills them all. Also, he doesn't instantly fall in love with Sarah Leaving's character, but because of her more mature personality compared to Jack or the rest of the group, she tries to manipulate Jack, subtly encouraging or discouraging his actions. Not always succeeding, but wearing down his will, until they finally have a window open to escape. Right before Jack snaps and tries to kill everybody. Bam! An arc, character development, a story that incorporates Jack's sudden mood swings, a stronger role for both Jeff Denton and Sarah Leaving, and an atmosphere of tension that builds throughout. Sure, a story that still has problems, but a much more engaging story with characters that actually make sense. Of course, here I am assuming that they had the opportunity to think through all this, and they didn't have to outline and write the script in the time it took for the official trailer of the movie they were copying to play through. Forget striking while the metal's still hot. This is a studio that has to heat the forge before the mine's even discovered.
I have no idea what that meant.
No, instead of character development, or even fleshing out the traits the characters already have, the movie focuses on two things. The rape, which, despite taking up a good chunk of runtime, is really weak, with very little nudity and the camera constantly trying to focus on anything but the rape. And the torture and murder, which is also infrequent and underwhelming. Lee Scott said in the commentary that he wanted a movie less focused on graphic imagery, where the tension comes more from having to watch the characters experience all this. Fair enough, but that still requires characters we care about, or at the very least can tell apart from one another. And the movie does seem focused on these scenes more than the characters we're supposed to follow. This is a story that could be over in 5 minutes. But because they have to make a runtime, they draw out the unpleasant parts to the point they lose their shock value. And when even they realize that the scenes are getting tedious, then just have something stupid happen. At only the 40-minute mark, they manage to subdue Jack and knock him out. Alright, so they kill him, find one of the phones he hid, and call for help? No, they run out the door, get in a car, realize it won't start, then run back inside. Instead of flagging down the first car they can find, or even just running down the road, since I'd imagine anywhere is better than where they just were. But at least they tied up or otherwise incapacitated Jack, right? No, they go back in to kill him, hesitate, then he wakes up, kills one of them, and goes after the others. And even with a deep knife wound, he somehow uses his slasher killer powers to get to his truck, which wasn't that broken down and abandoned in the middle of the highway earlier? Where did that come from? And the woman he's chasing down runs off to the side and hides in the car or leaps the fence so he can't get to her, right? No, she runs in a perfectly straight line, allowing him to hit her dead on and recapture the rest of the group. And later, a husband-wife couple stop by the motel to check in, and they see the clearly bloodstained Jack in the destroyed rooms, get back in their car, and drive like the truck from Duel is right behind them. Right, no, of course not. They buy his story that he's the manager doing some maintenance, allowing him to murder the husband and add the wife to his little harem. Yeah, Allison's friends from Tucker and Dale vs. Evil called. They say you've earned their pity. But, like I said, Jack's not above his own stupid mistakes. How does the group finally manage to escape his clutches? The new arrival had a cell phone with her. Because, after going through all the trouble of stealing everyone else's phones, disconnecting the motel's landline, and sabotaging the cars so nobody could get away, of course he didn't search her when he first grabbed her. Of course he didn't! And yep, just to round everything off, we get the dumb cop cliché. Not the dumbest of cops I've seen, thank God, since they actually do investigate and don't just drive off when Jack tells them that the call was a hoax. But they do stand outside as a clearly lying man tells them he's the manager of a motel with busted and bloody doors, allowing said man to grab a shotgun and start blowing them away. Oh, and he didn't check the dead husband's body either, since the women grab a knife out of his pocket, undo their straps, and run like hell, stealing the police car and letting the cop get killed in the process. Look, I get it. Bad decisions in horror movies go together like Sam Raimi and his Oldsmobile. But there has to be some sign of agency. Some victory made because somebody was half intelligent, and not that everyone survives just because the universe decrees it. The movie clearly forces these choices on these characters just to get them where they need to be, and not because these are things they naturally do, or because some other force causes them to act this way. Originally, I wrote that the movie could have at least killed off more characters to offset just how stupid these decisions are, but then I realized I don't want anyone dead. Not because I care about them, but because of how much I don't care. These characters have not established themselves as anything. They're not fun or relatable enough to want to see live, yet they're not annoying or loathsome enough to want to see dead. They're just stuck in that zone where I completely neutral-faced no matter what they do. It's like watching the human ant farm from Solar Opposites from the alien's point of view. Oh sure, things are happening, people are dying, some kind of victory is being achieved, but it's not leading to anything meaningful and nobody stands out. All I'm thinking about is that the planet will one day be terraformed to suit the superior alien species, and humanity will be extinct. So why am I wasting my time watching people I don't know in a situation I don't care about? If the movie can't be bothered to make me care if anyone lives or dies, then why even bother having characters? Just film the exterior of the motel for 90 minutes. Compared to the flesh blobs we're supposed to give a darn about, it'll be the most thrilling thing I've ever seen. Said flesh blobs are played by mostly returning faces, with one or two new names making their Asylum debut here. As we went over, Jeff Denton plays Jack, the crazy hitchhiker, and Sarah Leaving plays Melinda, the central and most proactive member of the group that Jack decides is his soulmate. Though, considering he was making Asylum movies around this time, how twisted would it have been if they got C. Thomas Howell to play the crazy hitchhiker? Oh, geez, I just had a fear delight spasm just thinking about it. Please someone find the alternate universe where they made that movie. Probably the same one that features the Hank cut of Freak Show. Also in the group are Sarah Hall as Patty and Jessica Bork as Krista, both of whom we've seen previously. But because Rebecca Kochan hit the road to make more eating out movies, they needed a new blonde woman to torture. Enter Shaylee Scott, making her screen debut as Denise, before going on to a short, Asylum-exclusive acting career. But her Asylum work technically predates this movie. Like Eliza Swenson, she's an accomplished singer who's contributed to the soundtrack of multiple movies, including Dracula's Curse, Lee Scott's film debut Art House, and this very movie. And you can even find her on the soundtrack of the more mainstream Smurfs The Lost Village. Which, hey, well done being associated with the best of the Smurfs movies. Sorry, Right Said Fred. And yes, because you're wondering it, she was briefly married to Lee Scott. Though it looks like they've remained close acquaintances, with her appearing in or performing songs for some of his movies, so I'm glad things turned out well for both of them. You know, besides having to be involved with this movie. Other returning faces are Alexandra Boylan as Jennifer, James Ferris as Steve, Dina Noravalo as Cliff the motel manager, and Michael Tower and David Schick as the sheriffs. Also, Erica Kessler is here as the opening kill, and Griff First makes an appearance in the last 5 minutes. And making his first, and only, Asylum appearance is Dane Hansen as Felix the other Hitchhiker. A guy who's based his career on mostly porn and internet videos, it looks like. But he was the producer for several comedy-based TV and web shows that have a decently long run. And he wrote, produced, and starred in that lie detector short that went viral about a decade ago. Because dick and gay jokes are just so hard to find on the internet. And Lee Scott returns to cameo as Doug the Mechanic. And if that's not already a sight for sore eyes, oh wait, what's this? And Lee Scott is dead again! Yes, at long last we have the return of the Lee Scott kill shot. Something we haven't been blessed with since Dracula's Curse, almost a year and over 10 movies ago. Great to have you back, Lee. You're just as entertaining dead as you are alive. I mean that metaphorically. Please don't actually die. On that note, I do have to admit that this is probably the best edited Lee Scott movie. As much as I'm fascinated by his work, most of his movies feel like a collection of disconnected scenes. Something happens, then we get a cutaway, then something else happens, and we get another cutaway. No momentum, no build-up, very little continuity. Just things happening, until they decide they have enough footage and wrap things up. And yeah, the movie starts out that way, with a frankly unnecessary opening segment, plus scenes of the motel and pool that could have been shown in any order. But when we get to the group, bound and gagged by Jack, the structure becomes surprisingly tightly knit, with everything happening in real time. Jack attacking them escaping, being chased down, getting recaptured, the new people showing up, and so on all feel like one long sequence. I can completely buy that this is the worst afternoon of someone's life. And when the sequence does utilize transitions, there is one cutaway and one fade to black. The cutaway to establish that it's hours later, and the fade to black to cut to the next morning. In other words, the proper way to use these transitions. I'm a little blown away by how good the scene editing is for most of the movie. Even for scenes that seem to go on forever, and there are a lot of those, there is a rhythm for cutting between shots. It doesn't feel like something is focused on for too long or annoyingly briefly. Everyone gets just the right amount of screen time to get their emotion across. The scenes themselves kill the mood, but I already went over that. But where it does get choppy are the action scenes. Obviously, they didn't have the time or money for Michael Bay level effects work, so they'll rapidly cut between shots to add blood or bullet holes and give the illusion something is happening in sequence. Thankfully, these parts don't last long, but I did start to feel nauseous trying to follow what was going on. Oh, and some shots are given unnecessary slow motion, which I guess was supposed to give it a Zack Snyder-like feel, but it just reminds me of that scene from Lethal Games where that guy was shot 1 billion times with a shotgun and slowly danced to death for over a minute. And Lord knows this movie could benefit from some Frank Stallone. Even some of the music sounds like it's from Lethal Games. The composer for this movie is Chris Ridenhour, making his Asylum debut here before becoming one of the studio's most prolific composers, working with them to this day. I don't know how much he composed and which tracks he just took from a library, but most of it sounds like your standard horror movie background noise, with strings and a deep bass section, and a couple chimes thrown in for the more intimate parts of the movie. But the movie does have one standout track that plays during the final action scene, featuring a pretty heavy bass guitar like something out of Metallica. It's pretty good, and I'm perfectly happy with calling it the Hitchhiker theme. Though, like I said, it sounds like a heavier track of that one track from Lethal Games. The camera work is also pretty damn good. I mean, it's Stephen Parker. We should expect that from him by now. Most of the movie is shot in a way I don't have a term for. It's like they're set up as wide shots, yet they're kept very close to the actors, almost giving the movie a bit of a surreal, disorienting feel. Like having vertigo while staring at the wall from a foot away. It's an odd way to keep everything in frame, but it keeps everything in frame while finding different angles and viewpoints to show the action from. Even in very confined spaces like the inside of a car, everything remains in focus, without things getting too close or cutting half of an actor out of frame. And the more claustrophobic shots do add to the movie's tension, and how uncomfortable everybody must feel being trapped in a little room with a psychopath. Inversely, the wide shots give an impression of just how isolated everyone is, and that help is not going to be just around the corner. We even get some impressive exterior shots during the car chases, where I'm still wondering where they put the cameras to get these shots. And of course, we have smooth tilts, pans, and tracking shots that keep everyone in focus while slowly following them, including several tilts from the sky down to ground level, which feels like a Stephen Parker trademark by this point. And for this movie, I feel he tries something new, placing items right in view of the camera, hinting at the significant purpose it's going to serve in the movie. But my favorite shot is this one, where Melinda is talking to an off-screen Jack, whose reflection is visible in the mirror behind her. There are a couple shots where it looks like the camera operator is losing track of the action they're supposed to be following, or even starting to move away too soon, but they're fleeting at best, and you'd have to be looking for them to notice. That's the magic of Stephen Parker. Get him to film your TikTok video, and he'll make it look like Birdman. Set work? Well, what set? The movie is shot on a highway, in a motel, and a couple cars. I guess I'm impressed they found a motel willing to let them bash down and paint over their doors. Though if you're trying to hide any copyright infringing logos, I think it takes more than a no smoking sticker over one of the letters to prevent anyone from getting litigious. Not much to say about effects either. It's a more realistic movie, so any technical effects are mostly kept to fake blood and exploding squibs. Though I guess good job making it look like this guy had half his face blown away. And they kept the muzzle flashes lined up with the guns for the most part. But it's during the ending car chase where it just gets backyard movie level embarrassing. A lot of guns go off during this chase, and there should have been a lot more damage than they show. Ow! A direct hit with a shotgun has only mildly bruised my shoulder.
That really hurt! I'm gonna have a lump there, you idiot!
And for anyone waiting for me to get angry at all the rape and abuse of women and go off on a tangent like I did in When the Killer Calls, yeah, I'm not gonna do that. I got angry at that movie because those elements were thrown in at the last minute, and it became a torture porn for literally no reason. Also, the movie had the gall to suggest that everything was Trisha's fault, that if she had just accepted the insane rapist, that nobody would have had to die. That, along with the terrible filters, stupid cops, and nonsensical villain reveal, is what set me off. Here, I knew exactly what I was getting myself into. From the second I pushed play, I knew this was going to be a rape revenge movie, that it was going to have sequences of people being tortured and murdered, with a large focus on pain and suffering. But I get the appeal, as long as they depict it as the filth it is, yet have fun with it. So while I don't agree with the subject, I only have myself to blame for sitting through this. But what I can get angry at is the audio editing, which, I'm just gonna say it, is the worst audio I've ever heard from an Asylum movie. Yeah, I know I previously awarded that title to other movies, but this movie did the impossible and managed to outdo everything before it. I legitimately can't tell if most of the audio was recorded on location or dubbed in later, because every time there's dialogue, there's obvious background microphone hiss that awkwardly disappears after they finish speaking. Like the Airzone solution, almost 15 years before this.
Wimp and wimp. That's what you are. Hey, where's my drink? Is mine? Yeah. Ooh. Did you use a condom?
No, maybe. I don't remember.
Denise isn't exactly looking, though. She's still in the man-hating phase.
Bad breakup?
She was ditched a week before her wedding.
But if that's not distracting enough, there's a lot of clipping. Lines will randomly start after the actor starts talking or before they're done, cutting off the beginning or end of words and other exclamations.
Hey, it's okay. Listen, when we get back, come with me. That's my girl. I'll see you girls later. Where is she going?
And that's if the editor bothered to add the dialogue, since there are a lot of shots where characters' lips are moving with no sound. There will also be scenes where they cut out all the sound, just leaving the background score, which I guess was done for dramatic effect. But since the visuals aren't edited to enunciate the drama, it just looks like someone accidentally muted the mic. The post-production sound effects don't fare any better, with delays up to a second between the action and the very distracting stock noise. And to top it all off, background noises that randomly changes between shots and will sometimes even drown out the dialogue.
Actually, Paul is perfectly average. Yeah, I dated pretty guys in college.
Okay, when I hit the brake, you just gotta shoot as hard as you can.
I feel sorry for Freak Show for calling it out on its inconsistent audio editing, because this is just a new level of not giving a shit. Okay, there's no long scene like an alien abduction or The Surge where they clearly forgot to include the dialogue, but I am flabbergasted how bad the audio as a whole is. How so many of these errors could have been fixed with some post-production noise reduction, or just moving the start of the sound effects a bit to the left on the timeline. This may just be the most distracting audio editing I've ever heard in a movie. The only worse audio comes from the movie's own behind-the-scenes featurette.
I played Patty, and she's more of the fun-loving, I guess you could say.
Which, considering it's just the four lead women in a hotel room trying to summarize the plot, clearly stumbling over some of their dialogue, it may just be the worst behind-the-scenes video I've ever seen as well. I'm surprised they even have a bloopers reel. You kind of need a competent final product to contrast against what you actually consider mistakes. Anyway, the movie ends with the group running over Jack. Except it doesn't, because then we get a completely unnecessary epilogue where it's weeks later, Jack is in jail, and the surviving women are still recovering from their traumatic experience. Okay, it's a nice scene, but like the beginning scene, it doesn't need to be here. The only reason it's here is to pad out the runtime, since before this sequence, the movie doesn't even clock in at 70 minutes, and afterwards, the movie barely passes the 80-minute mark. Look, I know I bring up the runtime for practically every movie I feature, but in general, I don't have a problem with shorter movies. Some of the greatest movies ever made don't even hit 90 minutes, but they have a story that fits that shorter runtime. This movie clearly just adds additional scenes to make a decent feature length. Are they necessary? Do they add to the story? Do they keep the tone and momentum going? Who cares? As long as people check the back of the DVD case and feel like they're getting a decent runtime for their money, what does it matter how many scenes they have to stretch out? And that's no different with this ending. There's a long conversation between the two surviving friends. Then there's a long sequence of Melinda having PTSD. Then there's a long sequence of Melinda asking her husband Paul to check out a noise outside, with one of the worst day for night shots I've ever seen. Then we get a long sequence of Melinda getting out of bed and making her way downstairs, where, what a shock, Jack is there, having tied up Paul. And there's a long sequence about how Jack thinks Melinda is the woman for him, all the time beating Paul. Which, God, now I'm having when a killer calls PTSD. And then, at the very last minute, the movie decides it's smart and empowering and has Melinda throw Jack's words from earlier right back at him.
I believe in karma. What goes around comes around.
What goes around comes around.
Just think of me as instant karma.
Turn down for what?
Then Melinda shoots Jack and the credits roll. The end. This movie's bad. That's about all I can muster. I don't even know how you can mess up a rape revenge film, but they found a way. The story is paper thin, the characters are either cardboard cutouts or some the fly-like teleportation accident of mangled character traits. The moments they want to be shocking are insultingly tame and go on forever. The decisions the characters make are mind-numbingly stupid and only work because the script demanded. And the audio is some of the worst I've ever heard. Sure, it's shot and edited well, with a lot of talent on and off the screen, but I think that's just attributable to the cast and crew's natural ability, and that they wanted work after this movie. This movie just reeks of obligation. I don't get the feeling anyone wanted to make this flick. But the studio demanded it, so they wrote something down, went somewhere to film it, banged it out all as quickly as they could, and handed the final report into Teacher so they could move on to the next project. And to be honest, that's basically what I did too. This has been one of the harder movies I've had to watch or critique, with a lot of time I should have spent writing just staring at a blank word processor trying to comprehend what I just watched. And if that's how it comes across to you, then I'm sorry. But it's done, it's recorded, it's edited together, and it's uploaded. And hopefully, you found more entertainment watching it than I did making it. All I have to say is that, if this movie ever offers you a ride, pull your thumb back and extend a certain other finger in its direction. Alright, taking another break from Mockbusters. But this time, we're staying within the studio as we take a look at only the studio's second creature feature. And the return of both David Michael Latt and Kim Little to prominent roles. Will it be better than what I just watched? Well, it couldn't possibly be worse. Could it? Hey there, you've reached the end of the video. If you enjoyed it, please take a second to like, comment, and, if you're so willing, subscribe. It's how my videos get noticed, and it encourages me to keep making them. And if you'd like to be even more incredible, check out my Patreon. It's a measly $1 to be credited at the end of my review videos, and if you'd like to contribute more, well, there are higher tiers and extra rewards. Whatever you decide, stay awesome, keep watching, and I'll see you next time.